Here we go. Hello there, I'm Anna Amelia and I'm from North East Animal Rights. I would like to welcome you again to another one of our Saturday Spotlight interviews, and we're delighted to have along Tony Wardle, who is the editor of Viva magazine and somebody who was there with Viva from the very start. So welcome, Tony, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this with us.
My pleasure.
So we'll go straight to the questions, if that's okay. The question which I ask everyone is about your vegan journey. So what was the catalyst and how easy did you find it?
I found that I was eating less and less meat. I was eating more and more fish. And then I had my own television production company, and I was commissioned by the Vegetarian Society, by Juliet Gallatley, who was then at the Vegetarian Society, to make a video for young teenagers. And in doing the research for that, I can remember sitting in the edit suite, going through archive footage of factory farming. And I turned to my business partner and we both just said, we can't be doing with this. This is just ridiculous. So I went vegetarian at that point. And in fact, 7 people involved with that film went vegetarian. I later married Juliet Gallatley, so there was no rescinding on it.
So we mentioned that you've been with Viva from the start. So how have you seen things change? I mean, obviously it's 30 years old now. So how have you seen things change within the organisation and also within the movement as well?
Well, the first change was to go vegan, because when Viva started, we used to tread quite gingerly around the word vegan. And then there came an incident. We started, or Juliet started it, in our garage. In the middle of the Cheshire countryside. We were surrounded by 3 dairy farms, and we were very isolated. And then suddenly a cow gave birth in the little field which our office overlooked. And it looked, there she was licking this little fella, and it was a bull calf. And then later, appearing from the gate, was the farmer and the stockman, and the stockman picked the little calf up and walked away with it, and the mother followed. They didn't need to tether her. She was going to follow her baby wherever it went. And that was the catalyst. We both thought, that's it. We know, I spoke to the stockman afterwards, and he just said, what happened to the calf? And he just cast his eyes heavenwards, and I knew they'd shot it. And that was the catalyst for going vegan. But it was, you did have to treat it a little bit carefully, because there was so much misinformation around at that time. Like you must have you must balance your proteins and all this nonsense. But very quickly, we stopped using the word vegetarian and we used the word vegan. And as soon as we gauged that you can't run too far ahead of the public. If you want the public to follow you, you cannot run too far ahead of them. So you have to lead them in a sense. And that's what we did. And unlike other groups, there have always been other groups, but we were campaigning on all the vegan issues, on animals, particularly animals, on health, on the environment. And as we grew, and we did grow really quite rapidly, we moved to Brighton to be more in the centre of things and within reach of London. And then suddenly, any hesitancy about using the word vegan, we just dumped it and we went all out for it. And that is the biggest change, that now vegan is an aspirational word. It was something late night comics took the mickey out of once upon a time. There's been a huge change. And I have to say that Viva has been very instrumental in driving that forward. Yeah.
I think for younger vegans and activists, it's very easy for them to, obviously they're not aware of how difficult it was to be a vegan. 30 years ago, you're talking about, probably nobody knew another vegan. And now everybody knows a vegan. So it does kind of like show you how far we've come. But I think that what you said about like making the decision to say the word vegan and to almost kind of like put it into like usage as a term and as a lifestyle and ethics, that's something which we always say we have to challenge it. Don't sort of shrink away from being a vegan. We need to keep these conversations going and to normalise veganism.
Yes, and what I am utterly opposed to is people who go vegetarian. Some people go directly vegan. They're very few used to. Some now do go directly vegan. Yeah. But for most people, it's a process.
Yeah.
And it really riles me on Facebook when I see somebody who's a vegetarian being lambasted by vegans. That's not how you get people to change. You don't, you don't get a dog to behave by beating it. You get it to behave by encouraging it. And they should be encouraged for having taken that step. There is another step to go, a very important step. But anyone who starts down the line, whether it's to give up leather or to stop eating red meat, it should be, that's fine. Now, there is a long way to go, and you need to follow this journey, and you encourage them along it. You don't beat them along it, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, most of us older vegans as well, we probably didn't go. I mean, I myself went vegan from vegetarian. I was a long-term vegetarian from the age of 14. So I was vegetarian for probably about nearly 40 years. And I thought I was doing enough. So you're right. I mean, if I had been that vegetarian getting lambasted by vegans at the time, I wasn't doing enough, sort of thing. I needed to kind of see for myself.
No, you're right.
And as soon as I saw for myself and actually understood and took it in, I went vegan overnight, if you understand that. I mean, it took me 40 years to get there, but actually when I saw the footage, I actually did it overnight.
Yeah.
But it is.
But you had behind you years of actually thinking about it.
Yeah.
And whether you're aware of it or not, there was something pricking away at your conscience.
Yeah. So we get, some of us who are members, we love the magazine that you edit, and how it's put together, and the
Viva Life, it's called.
Viva Life, yes, Viva Life magazine. Yeah, we absolutely love it because it's kind of covers everything. It kind of covers the hard, gritty stuff. It covers, the food side of it, the lifestyle, the ethics, some really hard hitting articles as well. And we know that you go to vegan camp out and do different talks and things as well, supporting Juliet and doing things in your own right. But what type of activism do you prefer? Because all of this is activism, isn't it? It's kind of like, it's promoting veganism. So what kind of stuff?
I'm a firm believer in using the skills you've got. And my whole background is journalism. It's originally print journalism, and then I formed a television production company. And it's not only where I've done all the other things. I've stood on outside factory. I've gone into factory farms. I've done marches, and I still occasionally do all that. But I'm happiest when I'm using words to try and push the vegan agenda forward. That's my background. That's my skill. And I've been a journalist most of my working life, and I do have some skills with words, which is why my personal email is called Words Wardle. And so I'm happiest doing that. I'm happiest pulling together, doing research, pulling together the essence of that research and presenting it in a way that anybody can easily understand. We just had this debate yesterday in the office. A new guy had written a leaflet, and it was very wordy. And I just said, look, when you're writing copy, think Sun, not Guardian. And I don't mean that politically. The Sun is an appalling newspaper, but it knows how to get to the essence of an issue very briefly, because they think they're talking to 11-year-olds. Or the people with an 11-year-old mentality. And that's a good thing, because people understand it simply.
I think you're right. I mean, it is like sort of, our group approach is we use education, because my background is in education, and I've done all the kind of like the stuff that you've talked about, the demos, the protests and everything, but I know that my strength lies in education. So that's how we kind of like try to continue kind of to push our message out in loads of different ways, almost like kind of like a magazine format. But we do try to do that, because it's pointless doing something which you haven't got any skills, you haven't got as many skills in, and you kind of like still trying to push, because it's not very authentic, is it? And you're saying that obviously your authentic sort of activism is because you have the skills in that area.
Well, it's interesting with Viva Life. It's quite interesting actually, because we started off. I started off trying to make it like a mainstream magazine that you might pick up in Smith's. And I wanted it to be done professionally, sharply, easy to read, but with very good content. And we in those days thought that most of our supporters were young. So I aimed it at a young audience. And then we did our first survey, and we found that most of our supporters were actually elderly. Well, not elderly, from 40 upwards. And but they loved it. And so it proves my point that keep it simple, but accurate.
So What do you think are the biggest issues facing the animal rights movement at the moment? Because there's all sorts of things. I mean, we know you've been in animal rights long enough, and I have as well, to see things constantly coming up at the fore, and then they go down again, and then other things come up. But what do you think are the biggest issues facing the movement generally?
It's a massive issue. And funnily enough, I'm writing about this in the next edition of Viva Life. The meat industry is hitting back. And it's got, mostly from America, but it's not just American meat consumption they're concerned with, it's meat consumption everywhere. They have got a huge public relations exercise going on, funded by the meat industry, it's based in Denver. They've recruited, I think it's 21,000 so-called academics, they're young graduates, and essentially they're feeding them information, and they then feed that into the public sector, the public domain. You saw Rishi Sunak say, I'm not going to put a tax on meat. Governments are terrified to tackle the meat issue. They think they'll lose votes on it. And it's now become a macho thing. I'm not going to tax meat. I'm just going to see the world die first. I mean, that's the continuation of the sentence. And the media is, we get a lot of our stuff published. I mean, quite extraordinarily. I mean, we've had double page spreads in newspapers going back many years. Hundreds and hundreds of them. But the overall thrust, the policy, the editorial policy is meat, 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 dairy, 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 dairy. And if you look at the owners of the newspapers, they're all most of them, nearly all of them are billionaires. And they know that to tackle the meat industry, for the meat industry and dairy industries to respond to what is necessary, to what is vital, essentially means the collapse of capitalism. Because meat and dairy are the biggest industry on earth. If you collapse that, you collapse capitalism. And that is the battle we've got on. And they will take us to the precipice and over before they... I don't know if it's all going to remain with, good organizations like Viva and others producing information, which is persuading people, but not fast enough. And quite whether we have to be more direct. I'm not talking violence, I'm talking direct action. I don't know. This is not on Viva's agenda at the moment because it's a charity. But we're not moving fast enough because the time is running out. And I mean, if you look at Greta Thunberg, who's become popular for abuse by everybody, an amazing woman, quite amazing. And she saw the threat as a sort of 13, 14-year-old. And it's young people who are the ones who are wised up. It is young people, and that is gratifying. And they have to be galvanized into action in some way. It's a huge battle, and it's a terrifying battle. And the governments all over the world, not one of them is taking it on. That's the biggest battle, and that is the biggest battle any organization will ever face, because it's global, and it is ruthless, and it doesn't give a damn.
I think, I mean, you've mentioned obviously politics there, and we know there's a general election coming up next year. And, you're right that most of the main political parties are absolutely terrified of telling people, giving them the facts, and putting their weight behind them, to say, look, we need you to kind of get on board, because there's difficult conversations. I mean, what's your message to the political parties?
Well, I mean, Keir Starmer is an example of, in one way, he's a clever example of a politician in that he has been very careful not to tread on anyone's toes in order to get elected. And the time has come when you've got to tread on toes. You've got to be guided by the science. It's the only thing we have is the science. And the science is all on our side, I mean, I forget what it is on global heating, something like 15,000 pieces of research. The number of pieces of research that says it's not happening or it's not humankind's fault, 0. That's the goal. They have to be guided by science, and they have to be brave enough to say, this is the direction in which we're going. Now, he's playing around with it with his great new Green Deal, which I support. That's great. It's not far enough. It is not far enough. And the first step, if they're all so frightened of putting a tax on meat, you just start to make meat and dairy pay its proper price. for the environmental damage they do.
Yeah.
That would be far better than any tax on meat. That would be the death knell, essentially, for meat and dairy. That would be a good start. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. The word you used there was brave. The need to be brave, and if the politicians who are responsible for kind of like, giving us information and leading us into this, the next 4 years, the next 8 years, they need to be brave and tell people the truth instead of kind of like they're worried about losing votes, and they just need to do the right thing. They're going to lose votes, but it's a.
I think it's the old story that they believe, essentially they all believe, whether they call themselves, a socialist party or not, that capitalism will respond. It responds to things, and when it sees that it has to now respond to or it will lose a share of its market, it responds. The problem is with the environment in particular. By the time you see the problem, it's too late.
Yeah.
So the ability of capitalism to react is no longer something by which we should be. I don't think we ever should have been, but certainly now it's not something that we should be relying on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all very depressing, isn't it? Really, when you think about it, kind of. I'm sort of in my late 50s now, and you're kind of thinking, I want to see some real change. By the time I leave this earth, I want to see some real change, and I know there's real change, but it's just like how long, how slow.
It will be a little bit encouraged because there has been enormous change.
Yeah.
Like I say, veganism has become aspirational.
Yeah.
There is, even though there is a massive public relations campaign now telling you that it's failing, there is a vegan revolution taking place. And Viva very proudly says that we have not to drive that forward. We have. But it is happening. And the forces are now ranged against it. But change is happening. The problem is it's just too slow.
Yeah, I think it's kind of going back to what you said like earlier on about Viva. Kind of, you've got to bring the public with you. So you kind of have got to it's almost like dragging them, but without them realizing they're being dragged into it.
It is.
Yeah. So
people. It's mixed messages that are the problem. There are we providing good, clear information based on science, and then you have every single thing that people read or do, whether it's Facebook or newspapers or television. It's meat programs, it's cookery programs, it's leaflets through the door offering, chickens at cut price. Every other place they look, the message is it's fine to keep eating meat and dairy. It's fine. Now that they have the power, they have the money, and it's extraordinary that we've got as far as we have.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I suppose the nearest comparison, although not with the environmental issues, is the tobacco industry. I mean, the outcry when they made smoking out indoors illegal and all sort of like the laws around that. But let's look at some more positive things now. Okay, so let's look at Viva. So in terms of the things that you've been involved with, what's been your proudest moments with Viva? I mean, is it getting to the 30 years and still sort of like going strong, or is there any particular projects you've done which you've really enjoyed and been proud to be part of?
Yes, and funnily enough, there are two things that happened right back near the birth of Viva, which made us realise actually we have the potential to be a force to be reckoned with. And it was, I forget how old we were, 4, something like that. And Juliet was awarded the very, very first Pride of Britain Award for animal welfare. And sitting in the Dorchester Hotel, I think it was, in Park Lane, with every celebrity you've ever seen in your life. and for her to go up on stage and be presented with that by Paul McCartney felt like we are doing the right thing. We are here. Yeah. And then the campaign that it was the campaign. It might seem peripheral, but it isn't. And we emptied all the supermarket shelves in Britain of kangaroo meat. Yeah. And later, much later, we went on and kept going on the football boot companies, and they've all moved away from. But the first step, Juliet was invited out to Australia to talk to Australian groups. And witnessed firsthand what was going on there with and it's absolutely brutal. And we mounted a really really big campaign, and we picked them off one at a time. We started with Tesco, and we had a double page spread in the News of the World. Crap newspaper, but occasionally did things, you know, good. And the journalist was so confident because he knew the power of the biggest selling newspaper in the world at that time, I think it was. He said, they'll fold by Thursday. And they did. On the Thursday, they folded. We then went after Waitrose. We then went after Sainsbury's. And all of them, one by one, emptied their shelves of kangaroo meat. Now, that was an extraordinary success for what was still a very small group with not many people.
It is. I mean, it's massive. I mean, the names, the shops that you were mentioning are massive stores, you know, and for them to make that decision, and you know, with a relatively small group at the time, is absolutely amazing. So I can understand why you're so proud of that. But I mean, I know you've had loads of
other campaigns, successful
I know there's been absolutely
campaigns.
loads. Yeah, I mean, we support some of the events up in Newcastle as well. We did like the Costa Dairy one and other things as well. So we are always we use Viva and Animal Aid leaflets in the main because you're much more aligned with kind of like how we want to send our message out as well. Educational.
They're good friends of ours, Animal Aid.
Yeah, and we do. We like the leaflets because the information is really, really good. It's easy to read, but also it's always backed up by science and the research studies. So when people say, "Where's this information coming from?" you can point to it and say it's coming from there. You know. So what's next for you then?
Well, tomorrow I hope. I'm 84, and I'm not sure how much longer I can go on working at this level, to be honest. I always thought I'd go on to the end, but age is beginning to catch up on me. I'm still working, and I'm still, words Wardle, as it were. I'll go on as long as I can, but I am old. I mean, I'm a geriatric, and it's really, really galling to have to say that, but I have to face up to the truth. And I don't know how much longer I can go on. I've just had a health check, and I'm fine. But I get tired, which I never used to before. I get tired, but I can't sleep. And the combination is a bit so we'll see what happens. But I think I'll be around for a couple of years.
Hopefully. I mean, I think you're a good example of, you know, when people say how unhealthy vegans are, we could point to you and say, this is an 84-year-old vegan looking damn good.
I don't look so damn good this morning, but I take your point. Thank you.
Well, to be fair, I didn't know you were 84-year-old, and I would have probably guessed about 10 years younger than that. So that's just, you know,
genes and a good diet.
Exactly, a good lifestyle, yeah. So anyway, I mean, we're coming to the end of our time now. It's been really, really interesting to talk to you. I have been kind of like wanting to talk to you for a while. So thank you very much for agreeing to do it. I'm going to sign off now. So this is Anna Malia from North East Animal Rights saying thank you very much to Tony Wardle from Viva, the editor of Viva Life magazine, and have a good day to everyone who's been listening.
Anna, thank you very much.